75% of women over 50 have pelvic floor issues. And so each person's pelvic floor can require a great deal of specificity, but I'm also hoping that by giving you a big general overview and demystifying your pelvic floor, it will make a great deal of difference in your lives. We're a small group, which I kind of like. And so what that means for me is I'm really open to interaction. If I'm talking and you have something that's really pressing, I was going to take questions at the end, but I'm really happy to have you unmute yourself and jump in. And I will also say that occasionally I will ask you if either you're understanding what I'm talking about or if you're feeling, having an experience of what I'm talking about. And I'll ask you to give me a thumbs up for yes, a kind of sideways if you're not sure, and a thumbs down, like I'm not getting this at all and it's not making any sense to me. Okay, so yeah, like if you're comfortable, just give me a little hands up if you feel like you personally, this is not just kind of a general area of interest, but you personally feel like there's some things you don't love going on with your pelvic floors. Yeah. Okay. And so for others of you, it may be general interest. Okay. All right. So let's see. I guess what I'd like to start with is a pelvis. So this is a female pelvis. And this is, of course, the bones without any muscles. And so the floor of the pelvis that we talk about is located here at the base of the pelvis. It's between your tailbone, and we'll find all these things in our bodies in a moment, your two sit bones and your pubic bones, two pubic bones. Now, there's 7 layers of muscles, connective tissues, and ligaments between what you see or feel or touch as the bottom of your pelvic floor and where your internal organs are. So again, it can be very complex. As I found out in my own experience, it was true. My problems didn't have anything to do with these muscles that I'm going to show you. My problems had to do with the ligaments around my uterus connecting into my pelvis. And we discovered I had an inverted uterus, carried 2 babies to full term. That weight was on my rectum, pushed it into the wall of my vagina, and didn't notice it until lovely menopause came along and that loss of estrogen makes you see it in your face, right? The collagen goes away. It's like that in all of the tissue with menopause. You just lose that kind of buoyancy and elasticity. So again, this is going to be a very basic overview. We're going to look at the classic pelvic floor muscles and movements that help them. And the caveat is that your issue may not have anything to do with the pelvic floor muscles at all. Okay. So I'll try. Makes sense, sort of makes sense, doesn't make sense. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of anything like that before. Okay. All right. So if we look at the pelvic floor muscles, we have kind of frontal area and a back area. And these frontal muscles in here have a lot to do with sexual response. There's more sphincters in them, a little bit postural muscles. They're generally not considered what you need to do for the health of your pelvic floor. Again, caveat, might not be true for you. So we can take those muscles away and we could look at the underside, how there's like this inverted bowl, or I like to think of it as an inverted jellyfish. And this area in here is comprised of your classic pelvic floor muscles. And on the other side, again, my model's very simple. So there's layers and layers here that you're not seeing of connective tissue and ligaments, but the other side of your pelvic floor is your pelvic organs, your rectum, your uterus and vagina, and your bladder. And I did bring a simplification of that picture. So you can kind of see in this picture how the pelvic floor muscles are a sort of sling that gives bottom up support to these organs. And again, the organs aren't just floating around there. They've got a lot of structures holding them in place alongside them and from above. And these pelvic floor muscles can have a lot of pressure on them, right? You can see the tailbone in the back, pubic bone in the front, pelvic floor down here, and each of the organs. So if I were to look at the pelvic floor from inside, and we also have this, right? You've got your classic pelvic floor muscles in here. And looking down this way. Another thing to note is that this is kind of an idealized female pelvis. Your pelvis might be different. And if your hips are different, your lower back's different, that's all going to make an impact on your pelvic floor. So, what are some problems that we can have with the pelvic floor? Again, not necessarily because of those muscles, but oftentimes including those muscles. Well, if you're like me, you might have a prolapse. And typically, a prolapse could mean that the bladder falls into the vaginal walls or the rectum falls into the vaginal walls. Even rarer, the rectum can fall out of your body, your anus, and your uterus can also prolapse and drop down into the vagina. So that's one thing that can happen, but other things can happen too. You might have incontinence, right? You might feel like you can't hold in your pee or you can't hold in your poop. Or in opposition, or sometimes hand in hand, you might have constipation. Constipation can be a real problem with your pelvic floor, and one of the classic pelvic floor muscles in particular. Some people just have pelvic pain. Pelvic pain can happen after childbirth, for instance, from dislodging your tailbone. Pelvic pain can happen from trauma, definitely from sexual assaults, sexual abuses, but also just from having a really tight, stressed body. That tight, stressed muscle can also happen in your pelvic floor, and then it's painful with sex or just painful. I had a woman come to me a number of years ago, a young woman who was very, very fit, very, very into her Pilates, and she was doing her Pilates so intensely and so vigorously with so much pelvic gripping that that was causing her pelvic pain. So there are a lot of reasons why people might have difficulties with their pelvic floor. And those reasons, they take us away from what the pelvic floor needs to give us. So the pelvic floor needs to provide support, as we saw from those for those organs above it. So that means the pelvic floor has to be kind of, strong. Like those muscles have to be knit together well. And if you look at men, it's they have, not that they can't have all of these problems, but they tend to have tighter pelvic floors. Women's will often tend to get looser from childbirth, also from bearing down, right? Giving birth, having constipation, even being really overweight. But yet, we need a certain amount of looseness in our pelvic floors because if we don't have elasticity, if we don't have flexibility, we can't poop easily, we can't have children easily, we can't even walk upstairs easily. It's even hard to walk if you don't have enough strength, enough flexibility, and enough variability between the two. So that's what we're going to look at a lot today. We're going to look at that kind of variability because we all need that. And along with variability, we also need, I'm just looking at my notes sometimes. Oh, yes, along with variability, that kind of jellyfish shape and all those layers of connective tissue also help with shock absorption. So part of this kind of movement of the pelvic floor has to do with us being able to absorb the force of just walking, just going about our daily lives. It also has to be able to kick in and stop us from peeing if we jump or if we sneeze. The pelvic floor also is part of postural support. So it's got quite a lot of duties for something so small and such a limited part of our bodies. So I think because we're a small group, I want to pause and see if anyone does have any questions here or thoughts about this. This is making sense. Okay, good. All right. So our goals for tonight are to have the first most important goal is to develop a positive feeling for the pelvic floor and that whole area. Because if we're having constipation, incontinence, pain, prolapse, sagging, we start to feel really, really badly about ourselves and about the whole situation. And in my field, in the field of somatics, there's a lot of academic research going on. And one thing that has become very clear in that academic research is that what we think and feel about our bodies impacts them tremendously. How we perceive our body changes how our body functions. So I'm going to invite you to select an arm. It could be either arm, and I want you to just lift your arm up and bring it down and feel what that feels like. Like, just notice the effort it takes you, kind of how far it goes. And then I want you to think that your fingertips have little like fish strings on them, fishing wire, like you're a marionette. And now the marionette master is pulling your arm up. Does it feel differently to you? If you have a different image that your arm is being pulled up versus you just raising your arm. If you're not sure, imagine that you're a bird and you're taking your arm up and out so that your wing goes all the way into your spine. Does that change how you experience your arm? And if you're not sure, that's okay. Sometimes it takes a while to develop kind of internal sensitivity to your body, but you could even let your arms hang and compare your two arms. That one might even feel a little longer than the other arm. So just try it. And if you're done with one side, try it on the other side. Just raise your arm. No performance needed. Just raise your arm, feel what it feels like. Then imagine your arm is being raised for you. And sometimes it might go further, sometimes it might just feel easier. And then finally feel like you've got a wing. Your fingertips are feathers, and the wing's going all the way into your spine. And just notice if it's easier to raise your arms. And you can do this, or this if you'd like, just because I'm curious. Anyone notice it? Yeah. So that's just showing that how we perceive what's going on. So we all think things and feel things about our pelvis. So we're going to try to feel tonight, we're going to improve our feelings about our pelvis and our pelvic floors and feel more positive and experience with that better function. So that means that we're going to understand more about our pelvis, and we're also going to do some movement that will help us improve the function. Okay, so let's stand up for a sec and let's identify what the pelvis is. We're going to get to those muscles. So remember I said that this is kind of this was made in, a medical laboratory, a medical model laboratory. And so this is like an idealized female pelvis. It's not necessarily your pelvis, but yet we all have these landmarks. And we're going to find these landmarks in our body because you have to know and feel your pelvis to be in touch with your pelvic floor. So can you see this kind of arc here on the pelvis? That's called your ilium. So if you touch underneath your waist, that is your ilium, that kind of arcing bone here. Sometimes we call that the hip bone. So see if you can find your ilium. Just trace it out. It's often easiest to feel our movement through our bones. They're very accessible to us. And then if you start walking your fingers back towards your spine, and you dip down a little bit before you get to your spine, you are going to find your sacroiliac joint. So you're walking your fingers back to your sacroiliac joint. That is where your pelvic half, because you really have two pelvic bones that connect, that is where your pelvic half meets the lowest part of your spine, your sacrum. And one of the things about pelvic floor issues is they can also manifest in a lot of pain in your sacrum, in here, and in your lower back. So that might be familiar to you. So again, we'll try to find our sacroiliac joints. Another way to do it is to put your hand over the ilium. I like to do it, my thumbs facing back. And you typically will feel a kind of bony ledge that isn't in the center. It's not your spine. It's a little further out there. So see if you can find that sacroiliac joint. And then you won't be able to feel this very much because this is all under your gluteus muscle. But see how the bone goes all the way down to your sit bone. And if we had more time, we'd look in detail at this greater sciatic notch here. There's some very important muscles that aren't your pelvic floor muscles, but affect them, that come through here. But you can go further down to that and find the sit bones. So now the sit bones, those of you who have taken yoga, I know the sit bones. But the sit bones are underneath your bum and at the top of your hamstrings. So if you find the back of your legs and take your hands up, you can feel your sit bones. They're like two bony knobs at the base of your buttocks. It's probably more truthful to actually find them from the front, right? Like if you find your pubic bones, and there are actually two pubic bones because there's a joint, your pubic symphysis, in between the two pubic bones. And see, you have one whole pelvic bone here. And if you go from your pubic bones alongside your genitals, you will find your sit bones from the front. And so if you're always confused about where your sit bones are in the back, because there are different bumps back here. You don't have to be on camera to do this, obviously. You could walk to where you're private, but it is much more effective to find the sit bone to come from the front to the back, okay? So that will show you exactly where your sit bone is, and why your sit bones are so important is because they are a primary place of attachment for your pelvic floor muscles, and they're easy to find and easy to move. Now, let's do a couple more things with that. Hopefully, has everyone found their sit bones? Yeah, their ilium? Good, 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 good. So the other really important piece of your pelvic floor is actually your little tiny tailbone. So here's your sacrum, and your sacrum is got this little tiny skeleton here so I could hold him up. So here's your spine, here's your lower back, and underneath your lower back is your sacrum, the part that attaches to your pelvis. And at the way bottom of the sacrum is your tailbone. So if I put my hands on my sacrum, my fingers pointing downward will find the little bone. That's the top of my sacrum. Again, if you find it from your anus upwards, the tip of it will be right above your anus, you'll locate it more clearly. But you want to know where your tailbone is because these muscles are attaching between your tailbone, between your two sit bones, and forward into the other side of your pubic bones. So you can go ahead. You can also recognize that you're not going to feel this either. There's a big ligament here, so you're not going to feel this part. But your pelvis is actually made up of two separate bones joined together in the front and joined with your sacrum in the back. And then they also, each of these bones contains a cup that your hip joint fits into. All right. Okay. So let's see a couple of things is that your pelvis can move in different ways. So just standing, notice that you can keep your chest forward, but you can have one pelvic bone come forward and the other one go back, right? So it's almost like there are two wheels here. Got my little wheels here, and one's coming forward as the other one's going back. And as that happens, it may not feel the same on both sides, right? So yes, you could rotate your whole spine and go all the way around, but you could keep your spine kind of neutral and just try to move your pelvis from side to side. So this is a big distinction. So it might not be the same on both sides, right? You can use your whole pelvis to bend over your hips, bend over your legs. You can also just lift one leg and then the other one may not feel the same. That's what I'm asking you to do is tip one hip forward, tip the other down, and just notice where they might be any asymmetries. You might even notice your feet. If one foot is turned out more than the other foot, that's going to change the shape of your pelvis. Again, these are two bones. So if one is, one side's higher than the other, one side's rotated more than the other, guess what? That's all going to impact the health of your pelvic floor. If you have a big arch in your lower back, for instance, I have a little picture of that. You can see on the left, the model has a more neutral spine. On the right, she's got a bigger arch. That arch is actually going to make your pelvic floor not as sewn together well. Let's just say that. So basically, your pelvic floor is in a great deal of reliance on what's happening between these bones. So making sense, sort of making sense, doesn't make sense. Okay, great. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do an on the floor exercise. If you don't have a floor, it's okay. You could do it on the chair, but the floor is going to make the exercise more helpful. And we're going to do this exercise. It's really more of an exploration than an exercise. And what it's going to do is help us even out disparities in the pelvis before we even get into the muscles of the pelvic floor. Okay, so find a place where you can lie flat on the floor. Of course, it's possible to lie on your bed or the couch or something, but the problem is a harder surface will be better. Make sure you're warm enough. If you need a little pillow underneath your head. Go ahead and not too high of a pillow, but just a small pillow. And if you want me to see you, then you need to line up your computer so that I can see you. And if you have that blur background thing, I'll never see you because it basically erases bodies as they move. I can also put myself on the floor because that way you can watch me as much as that might help you. You're just going to lie on your back. It's up to you to start with if you want your knees bent or straightened. Because the first thing we're going to do is just observe. And so another thing that research is showing in my field of somatic movement is that usually people don't have much internal sensing or internal interoception unless something unpleasant is happening or something tremendously wonderful. Don't have much ability to experience the ordinary fully and deeply in our bodies. We have to train that interoception. It's kind of a neutral interoception. But that allows us to organize our mind, our emotions, and our bodies more effectively and with more synergy. So what I'd like you to do right now is just notice your breathing without doing anything to it. You can get a sense of the length of your inhalations, a sense of the length of your exhalations. One might be longer than the other. You may notice your breath more in some places than in other places. And it's all good right now. There's no pass or fail. There's no doing anything. It's just you're being observational and curious, feeling how your breath moves. And then start to just notice how and where your body makes contact with the floor. I will guide you. Because honestly, your pelvic floor is not disconnected from your posture. So we're going to notice our spine first. You're going to notice, however you are, how the back of your head rests on the floor. You're going to notice that there's a space between the arch of your neck and the floor. And then your spine is going to start touching. So see if you can determine where your spine starts making contact with the floor. If you don't know the exact vertebra, that's not the point. The point is just for you to feel from the inside out how and where your spine makes contact, and notice how much contact there is until your lower back lifts away from the floor. And it's important here that you remember, if you're starting with your knees bent or straight, your knees are straight, you're probably going to feel that contact point a little higher up in your back, but no matter who you are, you're going to feel like there's a little bit of space between the small of your back and the floor, or at least less pressure on the small of your back. You might even feel like it's a pretty big arch. You might feel like something like a fist could fit under there, or a couple flats of your hand, or one flat of your hand. Just noticing. And that's your lower back, your lumbar spine. Again, a lot of the relationship between what that does and what your pelvic floor does. Then you come down to the sacrum. which has a bit of an outward curve, so it's going to make contact. And the sacrum, remember, is attached to those two pelvic halves. So two sides of your pelvis. So you can notice, does that all feel flush? Do you feel even from left to right? Or do you feel like there's maybe more weight on the right side than the other, than the left, or vice versa? You might notice that one side of your pelvis is a little higher up towards your ribs than the other side. You might notice other things I'm not even saying. But you're just checking in to see if your sacrum feels flush or if you feel tipped or tilted. If you seem symmetrical. And the same thing can be said for observing the length of your legs. Do they seem to be the same length if they're stretched out? Do your feet and knees seem to be in the same position? One side to the other. Because remember, I said that what your feet and hips are doing affects your pelvic floor. So you're kind of on a fact-finding mission without making any kind of assessments or judgments, not trying to fix things. But sometimes the fact-finding mission also makes a great deal of difference in how you experience your body. You might notice that you're just starting to relax. Now, we're going to start a movement that involves you having your feet flat on the floor. So go ahead and put your feet flat on the floor. And then what we're going to do is bring the small of the back to the floor and the small of the back away from the floor. So this involves a pelvic tilting, right? So it's not just your lower back. You're tipping and tilting your pelvis. Do this, please, with as little effort as possible and with as much coordination of your breath with your breath as you can. So it's extremely gentle, because another thing that somatic movement does is it reprograms the habits of your movement. We all have habits, right? Like when you get into your car, you don't have to think about how to start it. But if you get a rental car, then you're in trouble. You got to think about it. So that's great for things that are healthy. But if we're holding our pelvic floors in ways that aren't good for us, or positioning our pelvises in ways that hurt the pelvic floor, then we're in trouble. So if you find your sit bones, right, those bones at the base of your bum on either side, you can feel them come a little closer towards each other as the small of the back moves to the floor, and a little further away from each other as the small of the back touches, away from each other as the small of the back comes away from the floor. So towards each other as the small of the back comes to the floor, away from each other as the small of the back comes away. Then you'll know that your pelvis is truly tipping. Again, you're coordinating your breathing with this. It's usually easiest to feel the exhalation as the small of the back touches the floor or goes towards it. Inhaling as it comes away. Feel those sit bones. That's already working on your pelvic floor. And if anyone has any, if you're not sure you're doing this well, you feel you need more explanation, please jump in and ask me, because I'd like you to all have a really great experience with this. Also, if you're feeling movement up into the rest of your spine, please don't inhibit that. Please let that be experienced. It's really important, actually, that this becomes a whole body movement. And you're just going really gentle and slow. You really don't want to make this an effort. So it's different to strengthening your body or stretching your body. It's more of a elastic, there's a word, pandiculation movement. And you might notice that when the small of your back gets towards the floor, that increases your abdominal activity. Without you strengthening your abs, just making the movement. And it's really curious that as your abdominals are more engaged in a contraction, so is your pelvic floor. And that as the small of your back comes away from the floor and you get more of an arch, your back muscles are more activated, they get more tight, and your pelvic floor widens. Now, we need both of these movements, right? In the beginning, I said we need our pelvic floors to be strong to help hold everything up, and that involves abdominal strength. And then we also need our pelvic floors to be flexible so we can void, we can walk upstairs, we can climb mountains, we can have babies. And that gives more attention to the back muscles. So you may already notice that you have a preference, and that preference would be very much tied into the habit of your pelvic floor, because people with very tight pelvic floors tend to be locked tight, and people with very too flexible of a pelvic floor tend to be stuck in flexibility. So take a pause, you've been doing that for a while, and return your legs to the original position. If your knees were bent, you can keep your knees bent. If they were straight, let them straighten out again. And now you get to do a little compare and contrast. So you can feel your breathing, if anything's changed about your breath. You can notice that either the length of your inhalations and exhalations or where you feel your breathing. And I'll also say that stress has a great deal to do with pelvic floor issues, that when our bodies feel a lot of stress, it's natural to get more tension in the back. And when we get more tension in the back, that may make your pelvic floor more loose. If you feel your pelvic floor being too flexible, you may even unconsciously grip it, in which case you could have a nice sore lower back and still have a tight pelvic floor. You could notice if there's a difference in how your spine makes contact with the floor. Really paying attention, especially, you can feel differences in your upper back, but you can also pay attention to the height of the arch and maybe even comparing the sides. And then when you're ready, you're going to bend your knees again if they're not already bent. And if you'll remember in the first kind of exploration we did with our movement, I said, imagine if you had strings on your arms, and that kind of did the work of raising your arms for you. Now I want you to imagine you have strings on your knees, and the puppet master is making that kind of windshield wiper movement with your knees. So your knees are going from side to side, but they're going from side to side in a very smooth arc, right? So you're not stretching or dropping to the sides. We're not trying to stretch out the opposite thigh or hip of the side we're falling to. You're not trying to see how far you go. Rather, you're just trying to make a beautiful arc. And you can feel your sit bones again as you make that arc, because they're going to be in a little bit of a diagonal with each other now. So just notice that. It's not a big deal, but just feel the ease. And again, depending on your body, you might feel like, yeah, it's easier to go to one side than the other. That's very normal, but normal's not optimal. But do less. It's great to stretch, but this is not stretching. Don't want you to go as far as you go. I don't want you to feel like you have to work hard to get your knees to come back up. I want you to imagine you've got two flashlights on your knees and you're just drawing like a rainbow arc. Very smooth and even. No stretching. If you go too far, what's going to happen is you're going to make a big arch in your lower back. And for most of you, just judging from people that I've worked with, like hundreds of people, most women are habitually in too big of a sway back or lower back arch. So if you drop your knees or push them to the floor, you're going to increase that arch. And I don't want you to do that. I want you to feel more like you're going over your sacrum. And you can feel that's what's happening as you go over your sacrum is if you touch your tailbone right there above your anus, that's kind of going in the opposite direction of your knees. It's pointing in the opposite direction of your knees. So at the same time, we're working to balance the pelvis. We're just giving very gentle, normal movement to the pelvic floor because in my work in reinvigorating my pelvic floor, along with noticing that my issue wasn't at the muscles themselves, I became very interested in the relationship of ordinary living and the health of these muscles. And that's what I hope to do with a little bit more of with you today. But to warm up for that and to balance the bones, less is better. Do a quarter of what you can, a third of what you can. It's all easy. And even the small movements of your knees from side to side can cause movement up through your spine. Let that happen. You may even find your head wants to roll. You can let your head roll. Remember, we're all locked in habits, mostly habits of stress and strain. The good habits we don't have to change, but the habits of stress and strain we need to unwind. And that's what you're doing now. It's twofold. It's your body and your mind. And then take a break again. You can go back to the original position. If you're having any discomfort in your back or your hips, you've done way too much. It's an indication that your movement should be smaller. And when you go, you can just notice again if there's anything that's different or more even between your sides. More gentle in your breath. And sometimes when you start to build this inner sensing, inner feeling, you might not be entirely sure. It might seem a little liminal, like there's something there, but you can't quite put your fingers on it. And that's part of the process of developing this interoception. And interoception is not only good for being able to be more aware and tuned in of the subtleties, shifts that your movement needs, but it's very helpful with your life, with your emotions, to develop this kind of neutral, curious interoception. So really give yourself some credit for taking the time out from your busyness. Really feel how your breath's changed. You don't have to make your breath do anything to have an easier, fuller breath. It's just really about dropping in and give yourself some gratitude for taking care of this up to now troubling part of your body. And then we're going to do one more movement. And this movement's going to involve creating a circle around these 4 points we've created. So if you go back to bringing the small of your back to the floor, we can call that north. It's like going up to Maine. And then if you bring the small of your back away from the floor, your tailbone gets a little closer to the floor, and we'll say that's going to New York or to New Jersey or something. So Maine and New Jersey, it's kind of a vertical line. And then if you stop in the middle and you take your knees a little to the right and a little to the left, if you take them to the right, we could say we're, starting to go out west somewhere, and if you take them to the left, we're going to go out to the ocean. All right, so we've got a compass. And then, and this is really lazy, then I want you to imagine you're lying on a bed of sand and you're just rolling your sacrum, that flat part, around the compass. So again, the sacrum is the part under the lumbar. It's got a little of an outward curve, and it connects to each of those pelvic bones. So from the front, it might look like you're kind of rolling your belly a little, like you belly dance. But in the back, you're feeling that flat part, literally drawing a circle on the sand. And because we're often, so don't let your knees go too far. If you let your knees go too far to the side, you won't have a circle. You'll have a elliptical shape. So don't let those hips go too wide. Keep it nice and tight. So you've got a small circle. And there is going to be bumps and jerks. There just is, because we have muscular tension and we have a lack of integration in our movement. So every time you go around, just try to smooth out the circle. And again, if anyone has any questions or you need some help with that, I'm glad to help. But imagine you're at the Howard Johnson's, if you guys remember Howard Johnson's, and they would give you those little drawing connected dots. You're connecting the dots. So you're not just touching the 4 points, you're making a really full circle. So you're like, doing every degree of the angle. It's like if it were a clock instead of a compass, you'd be going through all the numbers of the clock, of the analog clock, because your body has habits and it's going to want to shortcut and not have you go through the places that really need you to go through. So you really want to smooth that out and make that as thorough as you can. And if you get smooth in one direction, guess what? You could try it in the other direction. But you don't want a shortcut. If you shortcut, it's not going to give you the same results. So notice if you're going more of an oval and try to make it more of a circle. And the other thing I'll say is that this is brain work, because you're literally using your sensory cortex of your brain is absorbing a new way of moving, a new way of doing things. Once the sensory cortex absorbs something new, it could direct your motor cortex differently, right? You practice in the rental car, driving it, and then your muscle memory just kicks in and your motor cortex knows how to start the rental car. So could be very taxing. So if you get tired, just take a break and rest. We'll all take a break and rest in a moment. But if you feel like you want to take a break, and similarly, if you feel like there's just a part of your circle that you're just not getting smooth, you can isolate that part of your circle. And then let's all take a break and just rest and recover. Yep, going back to your original position, finding the length of your inhalations and exhalations. Noticing where you feel your breath. It might be in more places now. Noticing where your spine makes contact, the back of your head, your upper back, how much of your upper back makes contact before your lumbar, your lower arch reveals itself. And that may be different now. Your whole sense of neutral, right? If you were standing up straight, you most people, not everyone, but most people will experience less of an arch because most of us have kind of an urgency going on with our lower backs. If that's not you, that's okay. You're not, there's not an absolutist blueprint. Then the sacrum may feel more flush on the floor, and those two sides of your pelvis may feel more balanced. Like you're not tipping or tilting to one side's not more up towards your waist and ribs, the other side. Your your legs are straight, they may feel more that they're closer to the same length. Your knees are bent. You may feel that your feet feel more symmetrical with the floor. And I'm going to invite you to just also, as you're ready, because I know this was relaxing, so there's no rush. And as you're ready, you can roll to your side and come to stand up. And as you stand up, I'd like you to also evaluate a little bit. Just notice, oh, does anything feel different about my posture? You can walk around, see how what your walking feels like. Sometimes if there's ordinary aches or pains and stiffness in your walking, that goes away. You can come back to some of those movements you were doing with your pelvis and see if they're a little easier or more balanced from side to side, one hip raising or coming forward. And then let's just, it's halfway through, so let's just take a few minutes, like no more than 5 minutes, but just go ahead and continue walking. That might feel really good, or moving, yes, whatever movements you want. If you need to go to the bathroom or need something to drink, now's a good time. And if anyone has any observations or anyone want to share something they experienced doing that while we're waiting for everyone to come back, please jump in. I think it's always good for people to hear those experiences because they can be very liminal. Hmm. Oh, it's relaxing, huh? Did you all feel a difference in how your body made contact with the floor afterwards?
Yeah, there's definitely a difference between the two sides.
Did that minimize?
I've always been a lot tighter on my left.
Yeah,
It was noticeable.
yeah. So the idea of the movement is to bring this into more balance. And as this comes into more balance, also how the hip joint fits in will come into more balance. And
Yeah, I mean,
also the lower
interestingly,
back.
it's like I'm tighter on my left, but I've like thrown my lower back out on my right a couple of
Mhm.
times. So it's kind of like it definitely is something I'm uneven, definitely.
Yeah, but did you feel it get a little more even from the
Yeah, yeah.
exercise?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's the beginning of balancing it. And I will say that a lot of the time where there's pelvic floor issues, there's lower back issues and sacral issues and hip issues. They kind of all come together. Some of you might have noticed that there was more contact in general between your spine and the floor. Did you notice? Anyone knows that? Yeah. Just a couple? Okay. So why that is because when you're in a lot of stress, this is just a stress reaction, your lower back tightens and it creates a kind of sway back. It also can just be from effort. If you're like a really, well, if you spend a lot of time at your computer and you sit in your chair funny, your lower back hurts. It has to do with stress and effort. Some people are the opposite. Some people are more just kind of collapsed altogether, but that's very unusual. Most people get a lot of tension here. And then the abdominals can't support us as well. And the abdominals are really related to your pelvic floor. So your pelvic floor gets more slack, gets more of that elasticity. Some people's pelvic floors just stay slack, other people's tighten. And when the pelvic floor tightens, now you got lower back tightening and pelvic floor tightening. Often the glutes will tighten, the anus will tighten, and all that will also create a lot of pressure and pain in your hips. So it's all related. And if you can bring your pelvis into more balance, because the pelvis, like this part of our body, it's gardening season, right? So think about a plant like a bulb. If this is your bulb, these are your roots, this is your stems and your leaves and your head. How you place the bulb in the ground makes a huge difference. So we're trying to balance our bulb here and let that continue into where your posture has to support your pelvic floor. And also, if we think of the muscles all being in here, and we'll look at that next, if this is all kind of, misshapen, then it's going to put stress on these muscles and they can't be healthy. So, yes, I understand, sort of. This doesn't make any sense. Cool. Okay. And in terms of Kegels, so if you're a person who has very slack pelvic floor, Kegels can be very appropriate. Again, not in this course tonight. There's different types of Kegels. They're not about gripping, they're about lifting, condensing, like kind of tying together and lifting. And that can be very appropriate, but it's hard to do a good Kegel when you're all out of balance. And then similarly, people have more pain in the pelvic floor, need to do reverse Kegels, so more elasticity, right? And every time we move, every time we take a step, every time we walk upstairs, every time we bend, for our dishwasher, we're actually in a position where we can create more balance and harmony in these muscles or less. Okay. Yes, go ahead. I was going to
So
say Dave, but you're not
I know
Dave.
I'm Wendy.
Hi,
Hi.
Wendy.
My husband obviously set this up.
Yeah.
Um, I have a slight scoliosis I've had since I was younger, since I was 13. And it's my normal at this point because that's just the way it is. And I only notice it when I'm hemming pants or whatever. But and I'm sure a lot of us have something like that where our normal is a little uneven, whether you have a stronger right leg than your left or something that you can't, that it's almost too late. We've already done that. So my question, yes, so what is it possible to have a healthy balance even if you're crooked?
I'm so glad you said that. You asked that question because, yes, even though I'm saying, like, oh, yeah, look at this ideal thing, and we want to get as much back to balance as we need to so that we're not in pain and we're not having dysfunction. But no one's ever going to be perfectly in balance because we all have those things. So yeah, you can have a scoliosis and not have any pelvic floor issues. Thank you for bringing that up. That's a really good point. Okay, anyone else? Any other questions before I go on to the next piece? Okay, so let's look at these classic pelvic floor muscles because these muscles are not, they're not all of your pelvic floor muscles, but they are important muscles. So here we go. And we are going to find all of these muscles because they're all in your body and your muscle. So this is the coccygeus muscle. And maybe you can see from the picture, I hope, that the front here is, you can probably see my little cursor. That's your pubic joint, your pubic symphysis. And back here is your tailbone. So this little muscle moves from your tailbone to your sit bone. So what I'd like you to do is to pick a side and I'd like you to feel, and I know, not everyone wants to be on camera for this, so, do what you want to do. But you're gonna find your sit bone and your tailbone. So find the tip of that tailbone and your sit bone on one side. Um, I think I'm gonna put the camera on me because I have this little red exercise tie. So I'm gonna find my tailbone and my sit bone, and I'm gonna notice, I'm gonna bend my knees and just tip forward a little bit, and I'm gonna notice that stretches out. And then I'm gonna stand up and I'm gonna notice that my little exercise band gets a little tauter, right? So you're gonna do this. You can do this sitting or standing. It's up to you. You could be on the chair, but you're gonna pick a side and you're gonna just put one hand on your tailbone and one hand on your sit bone. If you have something to bring between them, you can, use that. And as you bend, you're gonna feel that muscle lengthen, and as you stand, it's gonna shorten. Now, as you bend, what is wonderful for your lower back is that you actually are rotating your pelvis over your hip joint. So you are not rounding your back when you bend, keeping your back neutral, and you're just feeling that area between the tailbone and the sit bone, right? So that is that is the coccygeus muscle. So try it on one side before you go on to the other side, because part of developing your interoception, your ability to feel from the inside out and then adjust as your body is needed, is that you start to notice a kind of liveliness and awakening of sorts from moving the muscle. So do it a few times, just tailbone to sit bone, and then just compare your sides. Like I noticed right away that my standing leg seems longer. Because you're the other thing about your pelvic floor is it goes kind of numb from sitting a lot, it's funny. And then you could try it to the other side. You could take your tailbone again and the sit bone, and you're just creating space. And you can also really start to see how these muscles are underneath us, like an inelegant way of thinking about these muscles. It's like the bottom of a paper bag, right? It's supporting you from the bottom. But see if you can actually feel the movement. And know that if you're a person who needs more strength in your pelvic floor, and for many people, it's good to get professionally assessed for that. But sometimes you can assess yourself. There are simple things. There's in the book that's in your links, there's some simple assessments if you need more strength or if you need more relaxation. Sometimes people need both. But the thing is, generally, you get more relaxation as you can widen, lengthen, and more strength as the muscle is condensing, because literally you have these things called actin and myosin, these chemicals in your muscle. And when you're contracting a muscle, traditional contraction, it's more like the muscle getting more knitted together. And when you're lengthening actively, which is more like, a yoga stretch, then the weave of the muscle is getting longer. And this is what we need for a healthy pelvic floor. And yes, some people need more of this and some people need more of this, but we all need this relationship. And then you've got another pelvic floor muscle, one of your anal levators, which you may have heard about, because these are, if you go to the PT, these are the muscles that you're going to be most focused on to build strength in the pelvic floor. And this one also goes from the tailbone, but a little further forward. This actually goes onto the inside of your hip joint. So this one goes from your tailbone. So see, here's my little hole for my hip. So this muscle goes more or less. There's some connective tissue there. I'm just going to have you look at that picture for a moment, and then I'm going to show you my model. This goes from your tailbone into the inside of your hip joint. Ooh, look at that. So now, can you do the same thing? You're emptying your dishwasher, my friends. And so your tailbone is kind of sticking out a little bit, not too much because you don't want to arch your back, but it's sticking out a little bit. And then you've got this muscle going to the inside of your hip. So your hip is located between your groin crease and your sit bone. So somewhere in there is your hip joint. And this muscle is lengthening as you go to get the dishes and shortening as you bring the dishes up. So feel it, do it. You got to do this stuff consciously, because if you do this stuff consciously, you get better at moving. And if you get better at moving, you have a healthier pelvic floor. And I'm not saying that you don't need to do Kegels, you don't need to do, bladder training, which is really helpful. I'm not saying you don't need to strengthen your glutes or your core. All those things are important, but I'm saying that all of those things are going to be more beneficial to you if you can feel and sense and experience your own movement in your own ordinariness. And after you do it a few times on one side, notice, is that side more lively? Is it more awake to you? You can feel these things when you go to do a Kegel or a reverse Kegel. It's going to be so much more beneficial and so much easier. And then try it on the other side. So tailbone to the inside of your hip. So it's almost like what happens with these pelvic floor muscles actually when you bend is they kind of open like a fan. It's like the end of the fan's my tailbone, and then the pelvic floor muscles, the classic pelvic floor muscles are opening. And that's what they're doing. They're kind of underneath supporting you. Try it to the other side. Anyone noticing anything? Can you feel them? Some sides, one side might be more clear than the other side. Again, that's normal. May not be optimal depending on you and your body and what you need, but it's normal. And then you've got the big one, the pubococcygeus. I like this picture. It's a little different than what I've shown you, but this was a little more three-dimensional. So you can see how that muscle just like slings. That one goes a little higher and back. It goes a little above your tailbone to your sacrum. And then see how it slings forward to your pubic bones? Yeah. So this time when you bend, can you feel like the space between your tailbone and your pubic bone is lengthening? And then when you stand up, can you feel that that shortens? So don't just think about it and study it, because this is the art of embodiment, right? If you're going to actually improve your function and the functioning of your muscles, you have to feel it. And it's different to exercise because we're not just trying to strengthen, but you got to feel it. Feel that distance widening and shortening. So it is a sling. It's actually a really important sling. It's a connection to these abdominal muscles here, the rectus abdominis muscles. It was a one muscle when you were in the womb. Like you could almost see it in like an animal, how the belly muscles came down from the ribs to the pubis, and then it went across your pelvic floor up to your tail, right? And so when the animal's tail is reaching, there's more length, and then it shortens when you come to stand. So feel that. And if you're needing to have more wideness in your pelvis, then you need to be more in this in your pelvic floor. If you need more freedom, then you need to have more of that wideness, that expansion. You need more strength. You need more of the gathering or narrowing, because it really is all like a fan. Okay, comments, questions? How is this landing?
I just can't believe the difference from one side to another, I guess is what I keep feeling. Like my
Yeah,
one side almost I can find it very easily, and the other side I just didn't expect there to be that much of a difference.
yeah. So what you can do is practice, as you practice on the side where it feels less enlivened. And just because it's less enlivened doesn't mean there's a problem. And if you're having a problem, that's an interesting piece of solving your problem, right? Is that it's just not as enlivened. It can't respond as well. And especially if there's also problems with the hip on that side, the sacrum on that side, sometimes the foot. Yeah, thanks. Great question or comment, Bethany. Anyone else here? Making sense. It's absorbing. You're feeling it. Not sure. This is not the presentation you wanted. I have a tough skin. Okay. Okay, good. All right. So let's see. There's also the puborectalis, which I'm a little nervous to bring up because this is the muscle that kind of loops around your rectum. And so for people who have chronic constipation, this muscle can really be the irritant of what's happening for you. And I love this picture because you can really see the tendon. Like the other pictures I have weren't really showing the tendons, they weren't showing the connective tissue. This picture has the tendon attaching to, again, they're two separate pelvic bones. So there's two separate pubic bones. And then it slings around the rectum. And when you have to poop, that sling has to go slack. And so again, often with constant or with chronic constipation, that doesn't happen. But you can again start to coach it. Sometimes what responds really well to this is manual therapies. There are professionals who will put on gloves and go up into your vagina and massage and loosen things up. There's also intimate rows. I should have put that in the links too. Intimate rows is a woman's wellness company, and they sell do-it-yourself internal massage mechanisms. They have like it's like kind of like little rods. I mean, they're very soft, but you have to learn how to work inside yourself. They have guidance videos because this particular muscle can be hard to get at through movement or through exercise. I know some doctors give Botox for it, but I think that doesn't necessarily last. Yes, thank you for putting that up. And I think the other thing that is important with this, and we can kind of all do this together, we were bending, but squatting. And I know that, our society is not really big on squatting. If you look at other places in the world, people squat a lot. But really taking your legs wide and even your feet point out a little, your knees point out a little bit, and just go down as far as you could go. Don't hurt your knees. Hold on to a chair if you need to hold on to a chair. But as you squat, you can feel the distance between the pubic bones and the tailbone. Put your hands on yourself if you want to, but also see if you can feel even the anal sphincter widening. So the kind of ring around your anus widening and getting pulled out a little bit. And I don't feel like this is the solution, being pulled out of its circumference. I don't feel this is the solution to tightness in that muscle, but it can be very helpful. And just feel the front to back sling and feel the wideness from your side to side. Like you can even imagine that you have like an alligator tail taking you back and down. And that will help to widen your pelvic floor. And see if you can stay here and breathe. Just nice and easy. There's a whole art to the breath in the pelvic floor as well, which I've outlined in my book a lot. And we don't have time to go into that in this presentation, but to feel your breath, that also helps to relax the pelvic floor. And then as you exhale, you can make a sound shh. And you may feel the pelvic floor kind of lift. It's kind of coming together and lifting. So do this a few times. Just see if you can widen your legs. Knees point out to the side a little bit and feel all that internal bottom space opening. You're lengthening all the muscles. If constipation is an issue, also know there's a ligament between your tailbone and your anal sphincter, and you're stretching out that ligament slightly. And see if you can stay there and breathe. So that with your inhalation, you might feel there's a kind of widening of your pelvic floor. And the exhalation will also narrow your pelvic floor a little bit. And on one of those exhalations, just making the shh sound and come to stand up. So I would say try 3 or 4 times. Again, if you know you tend to be in the more loose direction, focus on the shh and lifting. If you know you tend to be in the tight direction, focus on the descending and widening. And how you can generally know those things. There's internal ways to touch yourself and look at yourself that would make it more specific. Certainly your gynecologist can help you, your midwife, your pelvic floor PT. But generally, if you have too much laxity in your pelvic floor, you won't be able to hold a tampon. Either case, too much tightness, too much looseness can make you leak urine or poop. Too much looseness is often, but not always, related to prolapse. Too much tightness comes with pain with sex, pain with defecation. But again, these are generalizations. If you learn to touch yourself and look at yourself, you can really ascertain what's going on. And there's a lot of resources you can do yourself, because I know it's it's a tender area. Not everyone likes to get poked and and probed, even by compassionate people. It's hard to share this area of ourselves with other people and have them evaluated. So just how many of you who have pelvic floor issues do have a sense of if you have too much laxity or too much tension in your pelvic floor, in these muscles? Does anyone have a sense? Yeah. Yeah, so it's not just, it can be, one way you can test is, that's like simple, if you have laxity, is like putting in a tampon and seeing if you can actually like wrap your vaginal lips around it or your vaginal walls around it and lift it, right? There's like, and maybe you can just hold it for a couple of seconds. Think you could hold it for 5 seconds, 10 seconds. Maybe you can't even hold it and hug it. Those would be signs of laxity. And then a sign of tightness could be even that you don't even want to put the tampon in, like it's painful. And if you put a tampon in, it's like stuck. It can't come out easily. It can't drop it. That's a kind of short at home exercise. But there's so much about, like feeling the texture of our own body and seeing what that's like. Looking at how much the muscles can contract and lengthen with a mirror so
Can I ask
that
a
you can,
question?
yeah.
So you've taken us through these different exercises. Is this something that we would do on our own on a daily basis to strengthen our pelvic floor?
Yes. So what you want to, I want to do some more exercises and then I will create a sheet for you for them too. So the first thing we did with the pelvic floor, that's with the pelvis, balancing the pelvis, that can be hard to do every day. That takes time, but it's something that should be repeated. And maybe there's a recording of this because if that's repeated, you will start to balance your pelvis from side to side and from front to back, and that will help to balance your pelvic floor. Then in ordinary movement, I'm giving you exercises that mimic ordinary movement. In ordinary movement, you need this elasticity. And people who have too much tension tend not to be able to move freely. People who have too much laxity tend not to be able to really contract things in. I leave it to my colleagues who are pelvic floor specialists to give you, PTs who are pelvic floor specialists who can test each muscle individually and come up with a specific program designed for you to be the absolute guidance for your stretching and strengthening exercises for your pelvic floor. These are more general supports for your pelvic floor. I think where I work with people is in creating safety to approach the delicacy of the pelvic floor and to give guidance around breathing and stress, to give guidance around self-massage, self-touch, and everything that integrates your posture and how you walk and how you move into the health of your pelvic floor. But PTs will go inside of you, which is not in my scope of practice, or they'll attach electrodes to you, which is not my scope of practice, and be very specific in determining exactly what's happening in your pelvic floor. I hope that helps, Mary Jane. Okay, great. Okay. So, yeah, so let's do a few other exercises though, to just wake up your pelvic floor and bring some more balance into it. Unless there's anyone else who has any questions right here, right now. No, okay, all right, so let's go back. Oh, I know what I wanted to say. Okay, so here. There's also the central tendon of your pelvic floor. So how many people have had episiotomies, right? when you had a baby, or you tore, or you had an episiotomy. So that's another risk for pelvic floor problems, especially for prolapse. So when you have an episiotomy, unfortunately, what it does is it cuts right at the center of your pelvic floor. So the center of your pelvic floor would be where, if you drew a line from your pubic, the center of your pubic bone, its joint to your tailbone, and then across from the sit bones, you would get to this central point. Sometimes it's called the perineal body. Sometimes it's called the central tendon of the pelvic floor. No one really knows exactly what it is. It's some kind of mass, some kind of body, but it's a great navigation place for you to start to feel what your pelvic floor needs. So if we like go back to those squats again, if you saw in those the picture, when you drop down in those squats, can you feel almost like there's a ray or spokes of the wheel coming out of that hub, that perineal body? And when you stand, can you feel that that perineal body is in the center? And it's a tendon going upward. So it's almost radiating up into your vertical axis, into your spine. So let's try that again. Let's just go back to the squatting and see now. So it is kind of a diamond shape, your pelvic floor, but it's also kind of roundish. So as it's roundish, just see the spokes on that wheel and feel them widen it. And again, especially if you're tight. So if you're tight, it means it's hard for things to go in. It can be hard for things to go out. And you get a lot of tailbone pain typically. You can have pain in general. Usually with laxity, there's not pain. Feel that the hub of the wheel, the spokes of the wheel. And then if you're more on the loose side, as you come to stand, can you feel that central tendon almost like it's just lifting up as if you're lifting a Kleenex? And that is the beginning of a Kegel, and a Kegel that's centralized to your pelvic floor. And then, so then you can decide, do I need to hang out down here and feel what that feels like? You know, you can even shift your weight with a squat. You can walk around in a squat and feel that wideness, where if you really know you need more kind of holding together, holding up, then just try walking around a little bit from the center of your pelvic floor. Feel what it feels like actually to make little circles. Or feel like the center of that central tendon is on kind of like a string, and you're walking around and it's leading you. And what you're looking for is the sensation. If it's leading you, you're looking for the sensation of it kind of helping you feel like almost like there's a carpet, like a magic carpet or something underneath you, giving you support from the bottom up. And as you're squatting, feeling like you just have that wideness. And then, of course, as you're walking, you can also feel your pubic bones or your sit bones, right? So feel as you're walking how the sit bones are kind of being in a diagonal from one another. And what you're getting is a lengthwise stretch and contract. So we're still in that stretch and contract, but more in a diagonal way. And if you don't want to walk around, you can actually sit on your chair or on the floor and just walk your sit bones, one in front of the other. And just feel what that feels like. To create space diagonally in the pelvic floor and then shorten it as you're moving your sit bones. Because as you're walking, your sit bones are moving, and as those sit bones are moving, it is ideally activating your pelvic floor in this healthy way of expanding, and I'm going to call it condensing, kind of coming together and expanding. But it's not expanding like, woo, like there's no tone there. It's an eccentric contraction is what it's called. It's a lengthening contraction under the pressure of what's above those muscles. And you could also play with swinging one of your sit bones. So if you like take one of your sit bones off your chair and just move that sit bone back and forth, the other sit bone's stable. And you're exercising that side of your body. You can almost imagine that your sit bone's like a little brush, and you're brushing a table underneath the sit bone. And see if you can brush that table with the sit bone without twisting your spine around. You can feel this ilium. Remember the ilium, the top part of the pelvis underneath your waist. You can feel that moving forward and back, but you don't have to twist and turn. You just want to feel like you're moving the ilium, the sit bone, and the pelvic muscles underneath. Yep, and if you don't want to do that sitting, you can try it standing. You can try standing as straight as you can and just swinging a leg back and forth from the sit bone, So notice when I'm swinging my leg, I'm not moving my spine. I'm just swinging my leg. So if I start moving my spine, then my back will compensate. I just want to feel like I'm moving my pelvic floor. Does that makes sense? If you're doing the sitting or standing, yeah. Because the key is that you're not compensating. You're using your pelvic floor for movement. And you're using your pelvic floor for movement in support. So you're not just thinking, okay, I'm moving, so my pelvic floor is moving, but you're actually finding the integration of the movement of the pelvic floor in your body. So to kind of repeat with that, it's like you're going for your dishwasher, you're feeling all of this widen. And then you're feeling all of this contract, and that widening and contracting from underneath you will help your posture. It will help you stand up straighter, and it will give you that movement of your pelvic floor. And if you know that you need to have more wideness, but not like floppiness, just more expansion, then feel what it feels like to squat. Really take that squat into your heart and do it. And when you're exhaling and you're bringing yourself up, can you feel almost like a channel of coming up through the center of your spine or in front of your spine from that perineal body so that you're really straight. And then when you're straight, can you just move the leg and the sit bone? If you're sitting on the chair, if you're walking, so I'm not lifting my leg and having to compensate with my spine, right? I'm not walking and there's some movement from side to side in my hips, but it's not much. It's more just like those sit bones coming forward, and they move a little out to the side, but they're coming forward as I walk. And I can swing them back and forward, and my whole leg will swing, but my pelvic floor is moving. Yeah? So what does it feel like to do that? That's my question. Like, I'm glad you're all getting it, but what does it actually feel like to do that? How does that transform your experience of your pelvic floor and your body?
I think it's a lot of it is that you're actually noticing it versus like, of course, you're making these movements all the time anyway, but when you're thinking about it, it's like, oh, if I pay attention, I can feel that particular area of my body moving and the tension of it or looseness of it. Whereas just on a day to day, you wouldn't really think about it.
Right. And so my other question is then, as you're feeling it, does that change what you're feeling too? Like, is it like, so here's the crux. It's like, if I'm feeling tension, like if my arm is tense and I'm just feeling tension, I probably won't be that interested in feeling it for much longer because I know it's tense. But if I'm feeling, oh, when I straighten my arm and bend my arm, and I'm really allowing myself to extend and then condense, does that make the tension lessen or go away? Do I start feeling something other than the tension? That's the that's the gist of it. And can I feel that as I'm moving, whatever I'm moving, is it taking pressure off something else that might have been compensating for the movement? So these are the things to be looking for. So these are less exercises, right? Than they're explorations into how you can inhabit your body more fully and in that fullness have more freedom. It sets the stage for, I wrote a few things down about somatic movement because it's kind of a weird thing, you know? Like, like what do you mean? Like I have a problem with my pelvic floor. Like, just tell me what to do, you know? But see, I see all the people who have gone to PT and they do all the things that they've done. And, sometimes they're helpful, sometimes they're not helpful enough, or they're just not even helpful because it's really hard to master the exercises when A, you're alienated from your body, B, your body's not working well, so you're doing all these exercises, but you're still on the road to surgery, or you're doing all these exercises and you still have a lot of pain. So I mean, I refer people who haven't been to PT because they do certain things better than me. They can go inside and do a lot of detailed analysis. But the thing is, it's like, I'm thinking about planes today because I was unfortunately reading about Newark Airport. But I was thinking, like when someone's flying a plane, it's all these micro adjustments that keep it on target. And so what we're doing is allowing, ideally, what I'd love to impart with you, for you is that you're feeling more. And as you feel more, you're A, feeling more ease. And that was perhaps evidenced in a deeper breath. And you're also feeling more subtlety. So you could be like that pilot that has to keep adjusting the plane very, very minutely because as you grow more aware of your body and you can feel more subtlety in your body, you can make more of the adjustments that are going to keep you healthy. And in our bodies, a lot of keeping healthy is having good organization. If you're bending over and maybe now, okay, when I'm bending over, there's those classic pelvic floor muscles and they're widening, they're opening like a fan. But if you're still bending and taking a lot of tension in your lower back and your lower neck and your neck, it's not going to help you that much, right? So it's like, oh, I feel just a little bit of tension in my lower back. Maybe I shouldn't arch it as much when I bend. That kind of subtlety. Whereas maybe before you didn't even realize, what you did until you threw your back out. And then you're like, oh, I bet it was when I grabbed that stuff out of the dishwasher. No, we don't want to wait until you have a big incident. You want to live in your body now in such a way that you can be adjusting as you go along to optimize what you have, right? And that doesn't mean making it perfect. So I was really glad for that comment, but it means optimizing what we have. Like for me, like I still have a prolapse. I'm always going to have a prolapse, as far as I know. I mean, I'm 65, like that kind of juicy tissue. When I read about women who reverse prolapse, they're all like in their 30s. Like that kind of juicy tissue I'm way past the juicy tissue stage. But it hasn't gotten worse. It's gotten a little bit better and it hasn't gotten worse. And I do not seem on the track for surgery. So am I ever going to be perfect? No. But I'm optimized because I can feel into what I'm doing. And I can see, I can do all these things. I mean, I think I told you that the first PT I saw told me like, don't lift anything over 5 pounds. Like don't run, don't whatever, play pickleball, whatever. But I can do all those things because I can feel how to take care of this because I've developed my interoception and because I know my body. I use these pictures so you can be inspired to feel what's happening. Because I know that as you feel what's happening, it's going to increase your coordination, it's going to relieve pain, it's going to help you to strengthen what you need to strengthen more. And that's what I'm here to offer you. So it's I think why also I didn't think about making like a list of exercises is because it's less about exercising than living in your body differently.
Yeah, that's really great, Donna. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? We only have about
I
10
do,
minutes
Donna,
left.
about the playing pickleball. So are you like, I know you're like thinking about your pelvic floor while you're playing pickleball, but are you actively maneuvering your pelvic floor while you like
I
play?
don't think about my pelvic floor when I'm playing pickleball
You don't.
particularly. I'm thinking about my pelvic floor like I have certain practices now. Like I have certain practices I do. I have a really amazing breathing practice that a teacher of mine taught me that's not belly breathing. It is diaphragmatic breathing, but it's not belly breathing, and it's so helpful to the pelvic floor. I realized how much belly breathing was hurting my pelvic floor. I'm a yoga teacher. I've been a yoga teacher since I was like 23. So I've been belly breathing for decades, but belly breathing typically will make people stick their bellies out. Guess what? You get tight here and your belly pushes down on your pelvic floor and then you go. So I have that practice. I do that. Sometimes I do Kegels if I feel like I'm losing strength. But mostly, I don't have to think about it. I just, because I've developed this muscle of just, you don't have to think about it forever. The thinking about
Okay.
it is,
Goes away.
yes. And then there are certain things, you're prone to that, maybe, you know your glutes are always a little loose. So you go to the gym and you really focus on those glute exercises because the glutes are lifted up your pelvic floor. But you don't endlessly have to think about it. No. Thank you. That was a good question too. And I love that I could play pickleball. And another thing, I learned a lot about, the right shoes because it's like the spring in your arch is very related to your pelvic floor, being able to shock absorb while you're playing pickleball. So there's a lot of avenues. This is just one. Yeah, go
So,
ahead.
are these things like running, lifting heavy weights, all that puts pressure on your pelvic floor, are they bad for you ultimately, or no, if you do them properly while you're doing it? While
It
you're
de it depends on your condition and your ability to do those things healthfully.
okay.
And that's a big thing. And like how much weight you lift. And so like weightlifting, yeah, like okay, so that if I'm lifting weight, I am thinking about my pelvic floor because I'm making sure that as I'm lifting a weight, the pressure isn't going down onto my pelvic floor, exceeding what my pelvic floor can support and my core. And that's a huge problem with any kind of weightlifting at gyms, is that it's all about what the machine's telling you, but really you need to have your core and your pelvic floor supporting that weight every step of the way. Running, I don't really run. I mean, I play some pickleball, but I don't really run. But I did a little bit for a while and I ran on a track and I started running with Hokas because they have like a lot of bounce. Um, but it really is like, okay, what does my body need? What can my body negotiate with? And what does my body really need to stay away from? And I wish I was told that because I was just given kind of like these blanket rules. And I was like horrified. Like I thought my life was over. And it's not. And I have a prolapse and, I'm not going to do certain things. But that's okay.
Yeah.
It's not, I can work. That was a big thing when I was told I shouldn't work because I work on the floor a lot, helping people with their movement. And the PT was like, but you're putting pressure on your pelvic floor every time you bend over when you're on the floor. And it's like, what? So that's a caveat about PTs. If you go to a PT, go to a pelvic floor specialist who's good, because they're not all good. In Northampton, we have Kathy Hardy at River Valley Midwives, or no, Seven Sisters Midwives, and Patricia Young up in Northfield. I can recommend both of them. And yeah, and if you want to learn more about your pelvic floor and how it interacts with your entire body, that's what I do with people a lot. I work one-on-one. I have classes, I have workshops. So, you can go to my website and get on my mailing list or just reach out.
Yep, and the links are in the chat. And of course, if you need them, you can contact me or Beth. And we did record this, so I think Beth is going to send this up to everyone. And any last wisdom for us, Donna? Is anything?
I'm glad it's recorded because these are, like, I use that analogy of the car. You have your own car. Don't think about anything. The car starts, you go ahead. But when you get the rental car, it's like, what am I doing? So you should feel a little discombobulated when you do this stuff because it's different. It's like you're getting into a rental car, but as you drive the rental car, it gets easier. So as you go back and practice what we did tonight, it will get easier and you'll get some really big ahas too. At a certain point, it's going to be like, oh my gosh, that really shifted. And that's the basis. Like, I'm in the book, I have a few actual exercises like you might get from a PT. And those are really good. You need to exercise, most of us, but you need a basis, a healthy basis from which to exercise.
Okay, great. Well, any last questions from anyone? All right. Well, thank you so much, Donna. That was really helpful. I thought
Oh,
think
you're
great jumping
welcome.
off point for this.
Yeah, and
Thank you
Yeah.
very
great.
much.
And if anyone wants to reach me, do so on my website. And if you have feedback for the workshop and you want to share it with me or Janine, and she can share it with me, I'd appreciate that too.
Yeah. And thanks to everybody for coming.
Thank you
Okay.
all.
Thank you.
Wonderful
See
to
you all
meet
soon.
you. Bye-bye.